Welcome to Logic Foundations. In this tutorial, this is our first tutorial of MySQL. What is MySQL? Well, MySQL is an open source database language that's used by every company you could ever think of in the entire world. It's not actually kind of true, but it is a very highly used language. It's used by Facebook, Google, major tech companies use this language, and it's a great language to learn because the syntax are very transferable to Microsoft SQL or MS SQL. It's very to Oracle SQL. There's a lot of Oracle database language. It's a very transferable language. Now, there's subtle differences between all of them, but this, for the most part, is a great language to learn because it gives you a great foundation to actually work off of. So let's get started. If you haven't watched my tutorial on how to set up XAMPP yet, please go back and watch that. It should be at the beginning of this playlist, because we're going to be using that to actually use Apache web server to host our database. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to open up XAMPP. We're going to start services, or our server. We're going to go up to services and we're going to start all of these. Now, the one we really care about is MySQL, but it's easier just to start all of them. So now they're all green. We're all up and running. There's a couple different ways to use MySQL. The easiest way that I found is actually just learning it through the terminal. The reason being is because most applications that you're going to build, you're not going to have a GUI user interface to the database anyway. Now, there are tools like MySQL Workbench and things like that you can have more of a visual user interface. But I found that if you're really working in this field and you're really trying to get a job in the IT space, and especially if you want to be a database administrator or a system administrator, you're going to have to learn how to use the terminal. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here, and on this main page, we're going to open up terminal. And on Windows, it's just the command prompt. It's the same thing. It's just a command line interface. So on here, to open up MySQL and actually get to the database system itself, now I'm gonna expand this out. The way we do this is we're going to type in MySQL. Okay, we're going to say -u for username, and I'm just going to use the root account because the root account doesn't require a password because I didn't set one up, so it's really easy to log into. So we're just going to hit root and then hit enter, and that will allow us in. You should see something along these lines. Okay. Now, this is your command line interface for MySQL, or the database that you're interacting with. Now, there's certain little commands that we need to learn right off the bat so we can actually navigate around and see what we want to see. The first one is show databases. And just like in a lot of programming languages, you end everything with a semicolon. So show databases does exactly that. It shows the databases that are already created. Now, there's a lot of them that are already created to actually run PHP-MyAdmin. There's a lot of stuff that the Apache web server uses the databases for. So there's databases already created throughout all of these. There's usually a test and database and stuff like that. What if we want to use one of these databases? Well, I've already created a database called LogicF, and if we want to use it, we're just going to type in use LogicF. Okay, and it says database changed. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Well, that means that we've switched to using that database. And this is a quick little tidbit if you don't want to see a lot of stuff on your screen, because I don't like a lot of stuff on my screen. On Windows, you can't do this, but on the Mac and the Linux version of it, you can. So if you hit the backslash and then the exclamation point, space, and clear, it will clear the screen for you. It doesn't actually clear it, it just scrolls it up. But it's nice because it scrolls it right to the top for you. So that's just a little pro user tip if you don't want, this huge line of stuff that you've typed in. So right now we're using that database. We've switched to it. We're using it. That's what we're actually in. So now we can type in some other commands like, is there a table in that database? Okay, so let's say show tables. Show tables is an okay command. We should say show tables in Logic Foundation just in case you forgot to hit or type in the use command, because if you don't, you're going to get an error. But since we did type in the use command and we're in that database, we can just type in show tables. So we've got a table called test data. So let's see what's in test data. We can do one of two things. Let's see what the structure of the table is itself. So let's say show columns in test data. Okay. So now we can see the columns that we've built in here. And you're not going to have any of this, and we're going to go over how to actually create this in the next video. But I just want to go over some basic commands to kind of navigate around the databases and the tables and things like that. And we're going to go into more detail on why the databases are set up the way they are and things like that. But right now, I think a lot of this will probably be Greek to you, but test ID, we've got, it's an integer, 11 characters. Null is no. It's a primary key. Default is null, and then it's also got auto increment. What does that all mean? A real quick synopsis is your primary key is basically how, when you connect tables together in a database, you actually communicate using joints and things like that with the primary keys, or in the foreign keys. We're going to go into detail on that later, but for now, that's what these are used for. The type, that's basically your data type, so it's an integer or it's a varchar. What is that? Well, varchar is basically a string or a English letters. Obviously the field, that's just the name, first name, last name, username, password. Obviously those are kind of just placeholders of what we put in there. Default is null. Well, that means the default value that's in there is null. Basically what we're going to do is when we put stuff in there, it's not going to allow us to have it as null because we have null set to no. So when we put something in there, we have to put something actually in there. Auto increment on here, that just means this is going to do all of this itself. So basically, when we put stuff in, we don't actually have to put anything in there. It's going to do it automatically. We've seen the how to see databases. We've seen how to go through and see the tables that are in there. And now we've seen how to see the columns in those tables. In the next video, we're going to go through and actually talk about how to create a table and a database and how to put information into those tables. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.